Hello, everybody, and welcome back to At the Table with Tom and Eric, a show about board games and other things. A show about the people who play board games. I was trying to do it without looking, Eric.
Yep.
I'm Tom Vassell.
And I'm Eric Summerer. Our guest at the table today is the owner of Surprised Stare Games. He's also a designer of several titles, and most recently is the developer behind the new edition of Kingmaker. Let's welcome Alan Paull. Hello, Alan.
Hello, Eric, and hello, Tom. It's great to be here.
And almost happy birthday to you, which you told us was tomorrow, foolishly, before the show started.
Yes, I know.
Because Eric will now sing to you, as he does to all our guests.
Oh, dear.
When it's their birthday. Isn't it?
Okay.
All right.
I'm grey. I used to be ginger. I'm grey now because that's what happens. I'm 66 tomorrow, UK pension age, so I get my first pension payment at the end of the month.
Wow, they just kicked that right in immediately.
Yep, straight in. Yep.
Me and Eric are trying to see who's going to last without going gray first. I think I'm going to beat him, though.
I am pretty gray already, so
yes, you are. I think I'm winning this one.
Yeah, I think you're going to make it, as my kids continuously point out to me. So before we get into to Alan, our wonderful guest, Tom, is there anything you want to touch base on before we get going?
There is. We have a Dice Tower Discord is now going, and you would think I'd have a link to put in the description, but I will put it in the comments at some point while Eric is talking. But yeah, Dice Tower Discord, and you can join in the conversation there. Dice Tower East is sold out, so I'm sorry, but I warned you. Dice Tower Cruise, though, is not sold out. I'm warning you on that. Come on out. It's going to be amazing. This year's cruise was fantastic. Next year, the ship is not twice the size, but close to that, and I'm excited about that.
Excellent.
That's upcoming stuff. Now let's delve into the past. The past.
We were having a lot of fun, Alan, before we went live, sort of going through some of your history with Surprise Stare and the various titles that we've interacted with. But I want to go a little bit farther back and get into your personal history. You're obviously in the UK. Where did you grow up, and where are you now?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I actually I was born in Huntingdon, which is now part of Cambridgeshire, on the eastern side of the UK. But I actually was brought up on the other side, in Cheltenham in Gloucestershire. I went to university at King's College London. I studied history and then war studies. Worked in information management with UK universities. But board games and game design were hobbies since about the age 11, which is back in the late 60s. So I started fairly early on games and board games and design in particular. But I was born in Huntingdon, and in fact 60 odd years later I'm back in the Huntingdon area as well. I live now in Warboys, which is 10 minutes drive from Huntingdon. But that's because my two daughters both got jobs in this area, and we have grandchildren. So in order to be close to the grandchildren, we decided to move back to this area to be close to them. And we were both freelancers. Charlie and I, my wife Charlie and I, are both freelancing. So we could move. We're free to move. So that was really good. So I've come back. I was going to say to my roots, but not really, because we're in a bit of Cambridgeshire I have never really known before. And we've been here about 8 years now, which is great. Yeah.
So what were you playing at age 11? What was the fascinating game?
Oh, well, we did the what was common then was to play family games at Christmas. So we did Monopoly. Am I allowed to say Monopoly on the dice?
You can say it, but you have to cringe like you just did.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Well, I'm looking up the top games that come out in 1955. We have Careers.
57 was me. But yes, Careers is a great game. What a good game. It's got depth. Formula One. Do you remember that? From a UK point of view, it was an old Waddington's game. Formula One racing.
What else came out this time?
Not like Heat, Pedal to the Metal, but actually really quite a classy game. It had cards for moving around. You had the superb driving car and take a corner at any speed, and it had gauges for your for your speed, but also for your brake wear and your tire wear. So if you go around the corners too fast, you wear out your brakes and your tires. So, and then you can do a pit stop to repair them. Yeah, it had a lot in it. And Totopoly is another very old game. Totopoly? About horse racing, really.
Okay.
So now what about Risk and Diplomacy? They came out a couple years later.
Yeah, I played a bit of Risk. I did play Diplomacy, but not till I was at college, that's the time you kind of waste when you playing Diplomacy at college. So I played quite a lot of those old style games back in the day. Yeah.
When did a wargaming direction head into your sphere?
Yeah, well, I mean, my wargaming, if you like, my earliest wargaming stuff was literally when I was little, throwing wooden blocks at other wooden blocks and pretending that it was a battle, which I think a lot of boys did. But really, more seriously, playing with Airfix figures and models, which is where a lot of people of my age first started wargaming, and making up the rules. So getting rules was really quite difficult back in the 60s and early 70s. So we used to make up rules with dice to fight. I fought World War II battles knowing absolutely nothing about the period, which was fun. It was fun, and I suppose in a way it kind of started up my interest in military history, I guess, because I've got this little model tank, so I had nothing about what they meant at all, really, when I was that young. So it helped me, it stimulated my interest in finding out a bit more about military history. So that was my early wargaming was that side of things. Also, really, back then, non-war games, which were hobby games like we have now, hobby board games we have now, didn't really exist. You had family games like Careers and those ones we've mentioned, but not the kind of hobby games we get nowadays. So it's a bit of a dearth of really, really good games. And war games was another outlet, I guess.
Yeah. You said you mentioned or you studied history in college. Was that part of what pushed you in that direction, your field of study?
I think it was a kind of a chicken and egg. It was a kind of feedback loop there, really, where I was interested in wargaming, and that kind of meant, I unlike most people, when I was doing school history, most people in school did social and economic history, which I think they found fairly tedious and boring. But I actually did political and military history for what we had as O levels then, which was up to 16. And most students didn't do political and military history then at all. So I was quite lucky. The reason
I wasn't offered this, I would have done this.
The only reason I got to do this was because I was one of the very few people who wanted to do music as an examination subject for what were O levels, which is at 16. And the only way I could fit music in the timetable was to not do the normal history, but to have special tuition for history outside the normal organised curriculum, which is why I did the political military, because they basically said, well, there's 2 or 3 of you want to do this. What kind of history do you want to do? And we all thought, well, we'll do something more exciting than social and economic history. We'll do political military. That was really interesting. Yeah.
Very accommodating.
That's
I like it.
How I got started off on it. Yeah.
So what music were you studying?
Well, it was a wide range of things. Back then I played violin quite well, I was told. It was one of those. I had an interesting decision to make when I got to about 17 or 18. I'd been doing violin for 7 or 8 years, and by the time you get to that stage, you have to either take it as your main thing and do like 3-4 hours practice a day, or you basically stop, because you're not going to improve unless you do masses and masses of commitment of time. So it was either do that or do game design and writing. And I thought, no, I'd rather do game design and writing. Music's loss is game design's gain, So I could have been a great musician, theoretically.
Wait, can you still play it now?
I can't play violin or fiddle. I fiddle around a bit with the bass guitar. When I was, about 45, 50, I got that urge to play guitar. I didn't get the urge to play guitar when I was like 15 or anything, but only when I was much older. So I bought myself a bass guitar, and I play very badly at that. I just play along to things like Bob Marley and Neil Young and old farts like that, really.
So you said you began designing games straight out of college? Is that generally the timeline?
Well, I started the first game I designed was when I was 11, and it was a game called Battle, and it was basically a kind of naval combat game, and it was absolutely terrible. I still have it tucked away somewhere. It basically involved you sailing a ship around the world, meeting other ships, and rolling dice to see who won a battle. So it was very basic. But that started me. That was really what started me off on it. Really stimulated by games like Totopoly and Formula One, which I always thought, well, I mean, somebody must have designed those games. So somebody's having ideas about how games work, and why can't I be one of those? That's what I thought. And then, I designed this battle game, and I designed a few odds and ends of war games rules, eventually a World War II and a 7 Years' War, a set of war games rules, which we only used with a group of friends. And I began to realize that actually it's actually quite difficult to do these kinds of things credibly. I had no particular expectation of ever getting published, but I started it more seriously when I was at college, and I met Lou Pulsifer, who I'm sure you'll know. And Lou eventually married my wife Charlie's best friend from school. So Lou and I have known each other for ages. And Lou had Britannia published, amongst other things. And he really showed me that actually, you can actually get some of your games published as long as you design and develop them to a sufficient standard. You have got an opportunity to get published if you present them to other companies. So he kind of encouraged me to do that. So I owe quite a big debt to Lou. He pushed me in that direction. But that was about 78, 79.
So was that about when the first published, for sale design showed up?
Yeah. I mean, my first published design was 1983, I think it was, City of Sorcerers, which came out in 1983 with Standard Games and Publications, so way back. And I did about 3 or 4 games with them, one of which was Siege, which was one of the Cry Havoc series, which was very popular. That's that. Once I'd gone through all that process, I realised that you can actually, I can do this, and I can try my hand. And I manufactured a couple of little games of my own for my own first company called Griffin Games, which wasn't a great success, but I learned a lot. I mean, part of what I was doing in my day job was print publishing, so I kind of knew a bit about that, and that helped when Tony and I eventually started Surprise Dare Games in 1999. Tony had got a few designs, I'd got a few designs, and I had this print publishing experience. So we thought we'll just get together and start the company and see what we can do.
I'd like to reverse here briefly before we jump into Surprise Dare Games, and I want to take a look. I looked up this Siege game.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. This is one of my themes I'm most interested in the world. Like if you tell me that a movie has a siege in it, I'm super excited. Whether it's a historical siege or Lord of the Rings, Two Towers, whatever it might be. Yeah. I love that, and yet there are almost no games about it. Why is it really hard to do? I mean, you did one, so you would know.
It's quite hard. It's quite hard to do. I think it's harder to do than an open field battle. The thing about sieges, it's all very, very, very contextual. I mean, how strong is a castle? You got to, or any fortress, you've got to work that through. And sometimes a siege is about long, fairly boring, tedious waiting around for the enemy supplies to dwindle, that kind of thing. So it's not an necessarily obviously exciting topic to do. Now with the siege game that I did, that was Medieval Small Castle Siege, where it's basically focusing on assault. And that was fun to do. But if you get something big like a Siege of Constantinople, there are games on those. But you have to then factor in the logistical side, which people don't like to do as much in war games now.
Yes. Well, some people, they turn logistics into a whole game. That's where half the Euro games come from. Maybe someone should invent a game that is a war game, but it has a little Euro game on the side, and you need 2 players for each side. So you find a war gamer and a Euro gamer, and they have to pair up. And we put $100,000 on the line to make this more interesting.
It's becoming more and more elaborate as we go.
That would be pretty. There is Race to the Rhine, for example, that kind of thing, which focuses on logistics. So you've got lines of truck. Have you seen that? You must have seen that one.
Yes, I actually think that's kind of a clever way. That's a clever way to deal with the whole thing.
I have recently played a game with logistics. The what's it called? Inferno, set in high Middle Ages, where you've got some troops, but the only way you can move them is you have to get wagons. So there's actions to get wagons, and you have to get food to put in the wagons. And whenever you move, you lose a certain number of wagons depending on how far you go. So really, it's got. Oh yeah, there are battles. The battles are incidental. If you can get your troops to the battle, you're doing really, really well. But that is quite a long and I like it. I like it a lot, actually. It's a nice simulation, but it only appeals to kind of people like me who are really into the nitty-gritty of military history, I guess. And it's not going to appeal to the average gamer who wants to get stuck in and get fighting.
Okay, well, speaking of history, so we're talking about the 80s and 90s here of gaming. You're designing some games and everything. But I'm curious what the gaming scene in the UK was at that point. Because in America, the gaming scene was basically mass market games, but then a branch, there was war games and RPGs, role-playing games were just coming to the forefront, while in Germany, it was going a very different direction with the Euro game stuff. What was it like in UK at the time?
The UK was a bit of a dead zone, really, for games. I mean, wargaming is always quite strong. Figure gaming, in other words, not necessarily your hex and counter stuff, because the hex and counter stuff you always have to import it from the US. There was always a strand of that happening in the UK, but very little of homegrown stuff. I mean, you have got Kingmaker, which came out in '74. And of course, there was a lot of diplomacy being played, that kind of thing. But the German games didn't really come across much at all until later, really. So it was mainly here. The shops, there weren't really very many specialist game shops at all. We had like Games Workshop and things. And one of the problems with Games Workshop was that they dominated the market, which meant that other games weren't really getting much of a look in, and the German games took quite a while to get across to the UK. So it was fairly bleak. I mean, looking back with hindsight from now, it was mainly tie-ins to TV series, like mass market, play it at Christmas type games in the UK. Obviously, it's changed hugely, thank goodness, since then.
So if it was so bleak, why did you want to be involved with it?
Well, part of the reason was I felt that what we could do is some decent games. I mean, we just needed to have some decent games. I mean, there were, I suppose, a handful of small companies in the UK. Standard Games and Publications was one of those. Games Workshop was another. And we're starting to produce a bit more in-depth stuff. But, I mean, Standard Games is mainly war games. Trying, I suppose, to copy a bit of the American stuff, but with the Cry Havoc series, which is skirmish games. So trying to have a niche and develop that niche. But the problem with the small companies in the UK is they never got that commercial backing. They never got that amount of funding to enable them to expand in the way I think that the American companies did, like Avalon Hill, SPI. I suppose it's largely because the American market was so much bigger, the German market was so much bigger, and the UK market was always much, much smaller. So homegrown companies found it much more difficult because the market was tiny. I mean, it's still, compared to Germany, it was still quite a small market.
So what made you decide to start your own company rather than ship your designs to, say, Avalon Hill?
Well, I mean, I think just the practical distances involved. Back in the day with no internet, it was actually quite arduous to
good point.
Even address an American company. I didn't really know how to do it, to be honest. So I that's why I went with Standard Games and Publications and people like Wotan Games, because at least I could actually kind of drive there and talk to them face to face. The internet revolution has revolutionized all that, because it's easy to address a company, anywhere in the world really nowadays.
So is that how Surprise Stare came into being? As the internet is starting to get prevalence, you had more opportunities to get your games out there?
Yes, but particularly Essen. I mean, when we started, Tony and I had a range of probably 6 or 7 little prototypes which we were trying to sell, and we thought, how can we actually put these in front of games companies? And we thought that Essen Spiel would be a good opportunity to put our games in front of companies, because the British companies were so few and far between. So we went out to Essen. I think it was something like 2001, something like that, just as a kind of toe in the water, and we took out some of our proto sell sheets, I guess, and prototypes, and we touted them around various companies. We found it was actually incredibly hard to break into the market, because we were just a couple of completely unknown English guys trying to break into a market which was actually quite well developed, with lots and lots of German designers who were very experienced. So we decided, well, let's use our company, which we had originally thought of as a design company. Let's use our company as a vehicle for publishing our own stuff. If other people won't publish our stuff, then we'll publish ourselves and see what happens with that. So at least we know we can publish our own things, because we had our own mix of expertise to do that. So I suppose it was a reaction to not being able to break into those German companies at that stage that led us to this particular model of publishing our own.
But you continued to go to Essen though, as an exhibitor?
Yes, I think we started in 2003 exhibiting with Copper Twaddle. And we originally went to Essen as exhibitors every other year, but very quickly we just decided we'd just go every year. And so from about 2005, 2006, we were going every year, taking usually a new game every year. We sell it at Essen, and took it from there. So the purpose of that, of those original designs, things like Bloody Legacy and Copper Twaddle, those were to sell those games so that we can then fund the next one. So that was our model: sell, hopefully direct as much as possible, put some into shops, and fund what was basically still our hobby. It was a hobby games company. We weren't paying ourselves salaries. We were trying to bootstrap ourselves up, really. And it took us about 10 years to become profitable, because neither of us was prepared to risk our house on investing hugely in this particular venture. We wanted to take it nice and slowly and build it up over time. And so 10 years later or so, we were profitable, and we were then able, with a track record, to license a number of our games to other companies. So things like Snowdonia and Guilds of London, and Confucius was a shared a co-published deal, and we do that a lot, and that's a good model for us. Co-publishing is a really great model for us, because we get their expertise, and we get their help with the numbers of games that we can publish.
Was there a specific game that you knew you had hit the corner with?
I think it was Snowdonia, really, was the one. Because with Snowdonia, I'm not quite sure whether we really realized it and when we first. Well, it was Tony's design, and I did a lot of development, and we did a lot of work on it together. It was Tony's design, but we found that it was a fantastic mechanism for effectively publishing additional scenarios. So basically, Snowdonia is building the Snowdonia Mountain Railway. So you're digging up the place where the track goes, making the track. You're not actually running any trains. You're literally building the railway. And then we realised that we've got this framework, but that means you could build any railway, just using the same framework and changing one of the core rules. So then we were able to do scenarios. So we had things ranging from the railway they used to take corpses out of London into the cemeteries in the suburbs, a short railway, and we could have little coffins going along, to the Trans-Australian Railway, where a track piece might be 1,000 kilometres. So there was we hadn't realised there's a huge variety of specialist railways out there which we could kind of simulate the building of. So, for example, the Himalayan Railway, where you have to have oxygen. So your workers will do better if you give them oxygen, and they do worse if you don't give them extra oxygen. So you can use all these different factors, different elements in railway historical railways, and make a new Snowdonia scenario out of it. And that was a fantastic thing. So we produced dozens of different scenarios, and I did one which was I decided, wouldn't it be a great idea to do a mashup of a war game and railway building? So there's a Petersburg, Siege of Petersburg, Snowdonia scenario, which is basically set in the American Civil War, and the Union player is trying to build a railway to get supplies to the siege, and the Confederates are trying to build their railway to maintain their garrisons, and it's a kind of mashup of two completely different genres. But the players in that game represent literally kind of groups of labourers who are building the railway. They don't really care who wins the battles. They're just trying to build the railway, and so you can actually build for the Union and you can build for the Confederacy if you want. It's perfect. That's perfectly fine. They'll just take whoever does the job. And that was a lot of fun. And we found that meant we could maintain our sales of that kind of whole suite of Snowdonia games by these little expansions, and that meant we could build up our funding and fund other things on the back of that. And Snowdonia's been through three editions. We had our edition, then we licensed it to Indie Boards and Cards in the States, and they sold a whole bunch through Kickstarter. And then we had our the big box super deluxe version, which was Boards and Dice did that, and a massive Kickstarter. And they actually put all of the Snowdonia expansions and promo cards and the whole lot in that one big box game. So that was superb. That did do us a lot of good. So that made us much more profitable, because we had a lot of license money, but not having to do huge amounts of work, which was terrific. We could focus much more on design then.
I definitely want to get to the Kingmaker project.
You need to do that.
It's not a surprise stare game. This is something that you did development work for a different publisher. And I want to talk about how you take a game that we mentioned way earlier in the timeline that is a beloved classic, and how do you bring it back into a new edition? How do you freshen it up? And how much can you change and still keep it the same game?
Yes. That is the key question. I mean, my job with Kingmaker was, I always call myself a developer for that, not the designer. So the designer was Andrew McNeil, who unfortunately died in June 2020. My role as developer was to maintain what I call the essence of the classic Kingmaker game, which came out in 1974. It came out in 1974 in the UK. And it was a bit of a flop in the UK, actually, but it was picked up by Avalon Hill in the States, and it went absolutely ballistic in the States in 75 and onwards. And it came, that version, which is a slightly different version from the original, came back to the UK to Gibson's games, and they had the license for Kingmaker in the UK, and there was a TM Games version as well in '86. So I wanted to retain the essence of that classic Kingmaker, which meant not designing a new game. I didn't want to break the fundamental design elements, design requirements of that game, and I didn't want to create a modernized version of Kingmaker with new 2020 style mechanics, because that would have made it a totally different game. But as a developer, what I wanted to do was to identify the major problems with the game, and to kind of repair those. In fact, my actual contract with Gibson's was to research in the Kingmaker gaming community what the problems were, to consult with Andrew McNeil, which was rather difficult because he was really, really ill at the time, and to sort out those problems that had been identified and provide a prototype of a new version. But it did mean sticking to those design principles, and identifying those design principles. Now, Kingmaker is a game. It's a political and military game where basically you represent a faction of nobles, and the conceit of the game, if you like, is that the royal families, the royal pieces in the game have no agency. So somebody like Edward IV, Richard III is just a piece on the board. You take control of them, and what you're trying to do is to make that piece, your piece that you control, the last surviving royal piece crowned, and you win. That was the whole idea. So the idea is that you're the faction and you have control of it, and it's a political game. There's a strong military aspect because you are raising troops and trying to take towns and cities and beat your opponents in battle, but you're also engaging in negotiations. A lot of politicking. There's parliament, for goodness sake. You can run parliament to gain extra power. So it's a lot of it is about wheeling and dealing, not just your conventional military stuff. And that was part of the appeal of the original Kingmaker. It was almost designed in contrast to Avalon Hill style, SPI style games, which Andrew McNeil also knew about. He knew a lot about those because he used to play them. He used to play things like Africa Corps when they came out, and he wanted to produce Kingmaker as a kind of counter thrust to that approach. So that's why we've got, and there was the influence of diplomacy on it. So hence you've got in Kingmaker you have alliances between people, which can be long term or short term. You can do deals, and there's lots of swapping of cards, and there's lots of that kind of wheeler dealing and backstabbing involved in it. But there was a lot of problems. And I would say that when it first came out, I mean, if it had only had a few copies sold, nobody would have taken any notice. But then it had literally hundreds of thousands of plays from 1974 up to the 90s. Hundreds of thousands of plays of this game. So when you get that many plays, you're going to get loads of the flaws coming out. And there were. Well, I actually listed out, and I've got a list here in front of me of some of the problems I'll just quickly go through 7. We've got the perception of undue length to the game. Often there were stalemates because people would run away to Calais, build up their army, but they wouldn't want to risk coming back and fighting a battle because they might lose. So you'd have these 6-hour or more games, and everybody would eventually just go home because it was just getting, you'd play overnight, and in the morning everybody's bleary-eyed, thinking, oh well, it's been 12 hours. Let's just have a massive battle and see who wins, and that'll be the end. So that was at least a perception and sometimes a reality of stalemates and undue length. Interpreting the rules and the map was really quite tricky. I mean.
Well, that's not unique to this game, but yes.
No, it isn't. I mean, I've got something I can show you, but I'm not sure if that's what you want to do. But where do the roads go? Sometimes it's really unclear. Does London control all the roads in the area? These are very, very, very difficult. Plague. That was a big thing. If you, the classic new player thing that could happen. you've got Edward of Westminster in Coventry at the start of the game. So you think, I'll grab Edward of Westminster in Coventry. So I'll get all my forces together, besiege Coventry, take Coventry. All my people have to go into Coventry. I've taken him. Hurrah! The next card, Plague in Coventry. Everybody dies. Yeah.
Yeah. I would like to talk about this in a therapy session, actually, because this happened to me and caused such trauma that in our neighborhood, one of the plague cards disappeared from the game. We didn't realize it till later, but the player who did that always went to that area because he knew the plague would not hit him.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Wow.
It's not brilliant. It's cheating. Cheating.
Cheating. Yeah.
I'm still bitter about the plagues in Kingmaker.
Also, you could have alliances, but you couldn't have alliance victories. So the alliances are automatically short term because only one faction can win. So that doesn't really work. Anyway, so there was also a perception sometimes that the lack of player agency, and there were random events. So you build up your stack and you're just ready to fight this battle, and then an event would come along, and half your guys would go to the far north of or the far north of England or North Wales, and you've lost your army. So there were a few problems. So what my purpose in redeveloping Kingmaker was to resolve these problems. So I'm focusing on playability and accessibility, particularly for new players, and indeed for, shall we say, older players who've forgotten how it worked before. So that's what I was trying to do with Kingmaker II, looking at those playability aspects.
I think that's really neat that you made that list of problems, perceived or not. I don't know that I've heard many publishers talk about that in the past. They talk about making a game better. Of course, people want to make it better, but you gave specific things, some of them of which I definitely complained about. I mean, we played this as teenagers because, well, we found it and someone had it in their house. We played this many times, but as an adult, I looked at it and said, I don't want to go back to playing a game that long where all my people get killed by a plague.
Yes, I mean, that's a typical... I think that's a typical feeling that a lot of people have. I mean, even people who look back with pleasure on some aspects of it, and then they play the original game again, and they think, "Why am I doing this?" Which is fine. And also has arguments about rules, because the rules were, shall we say, ambiguous in places, which is a common thing. And in 1974, we didn't know how to write rules. In 1974, it was hopeless. I mean. One thing I found
someone needs to pin this because in 2050, someone's going to go, we didn't know how to write rules in 2023.
Well, I'll tell you the difference. The difference here is, I look back, I researched back who was involved in this, particularly when it went to Avalon Hill. They had their top people, and people like Mike Ewell. They had Charles Vasey did some work on it from the UK. So they had their top developers on it. And when you look at the rules and you think, yeah, okay, why didn't they make that sentence clear? Because it's still not clear. How do you capture a royal peace unambiguously? It's not clear in the world. Do you have to go into a town to capture that royal peace? It's not clear in any version what you have to do. So that's why people had to do house rules. So we were engaged in changing that. But the difference between then and now is then they had I suppose they had a relatively small group doing this, and they were going to be rushed for time because it came out in 75, so it didn't spend a huge amount of time on it because it was the Avalon Hill version came out in 75, I think, but the UK one was 74, so that's not a long time. Now, I started the work in July 2019, and we spent there was a global pandemic. It kind of slows things down quite a lot. But I had a rules review team. I had a 5-strong rules review team. I had a couple of Americans and 3 Brits, most of whom were experienced players, and some of them were experienced game developers as well. Plus, I had I counted them up actually the other day. I had about 75 additional play testers who were crunching that game on Tabletop Simulator eventually, and I reckon I must have spent at least over the period July 2019 to end of 21, I must have spent at least 300 hours literally just running playtests. That's not doing development. That's just running playtests, mainly online.
And you didn't get sick of the game?
No. I like Kingmaker.
Well, yeah, I get that you like it, but that's a lot of hours.
It's a lot. Well, yeah. I mean, it's like 3 hours. It's 3 hours a play, and usually I'm watching. Usually I was watching people play, seeing what their reactions were to stuff.
That's even more grueling. You're not even in the game. You're just watching.
Yeah, I did play a few times. The online thing did probably double the amount of time it took to do it. Because I started off, as I said, starting July 2019. I arranged a whole. Once I got the basic new prototype worked out, I arranged for some face-to-face games with Eclectic Games in Reading. We had a whole series of weekends where we were going to play Kingmaker face-to-face. It was going to be great. And then the plague hit, and that all just got cancelled completely. So that meant I had to spend hours and hours getting all the assets done on initially Tabletopia and then Tabletop Simulator. And there's a lot of assets in Kingmaker. I mean, I was looking. I've got a copy here, but I was looking at the list of components, thinking of how you trying to put this on an online thing. You've got 90 crown cards, 140 event cards, 40 other cards. So you've got over 250 cards, and there's 329 die cut counters. Okay, a lot of them are repeats, things like fraction markers and stuff. But that's a heck of a lot of assets. So there's a lot of time spent putting that on the online platforms. But the point is, you can still do it. I mean, if we hadn't had online, then the pandemic would have stopped development of that game entirely, because it's reliant on playtesting. You can't do this without a lot of playtesting, huge amounts of playtesting.
Were there any changes that you made that you heard from your playtesters or fans of the original game that said, this doesn't feel like Kingmaker anymore? This is a step too far in updating.
There's always be one old guy who complains no matter what you do.
Well, yeah, we had a couple of those, but I mean, the main changes we made, the main problem we had, one of the main problems, as I said, was stalemate, because it's the one sole king surviving that wins the game. So we had to cut the game length down, and we did that by introducing effectively victory points, which we call prestige points. So you get a prestige point for every office, archbishop, and city that you have, plus the royal piece. Get a bunch for the royal pieces. And that meant that we could set a prestige point level for a different prestige point level for winning for each player count and for alliances. So 2 to 5 players. So if you play a 5-player game, there's a specific number of prestige points you need to win as an individual faction, and a higher number of points you need to win as an alliance of 2, and a higher number of points again that you need for an alliance of 3. So that the advantage there is that you can see it all laid out. You can see, I've got this many prestige points, so I know what I've got to do to get the other prestige points to hit the target. Once you'd hit that target, you could claim a prestige card, a prestige victory card, but you have to hold it for a round. So everybody will potentially gang up on you anyway. And if you can hold it for a round, you win. So that means we got the game length down, so you could play a 4-player or 5-player game in an evening. So I estimated 45 minutes plus 30 minutes per player, and that's been borne out pretty well by playtesting and by real life playing with the main game. So that's still quite a long game, but it's not unnaturally long, and it's much better than the old stalemate problem. So that's part of the influence of Eurogame style things on this version of Kingmaker, but it doesn't it does fundamentally change it in the sense that it changes the victory condition, but it still gives you that same flavor of Kingmaker. It's a bit more like playing, rather than playing the whole Wars of the Roses, you're playing part of it up to a time when somebody has a decisive victory, like up to when Edward IV becomes king, and that's the end of the game. And then you play another game later on if you want. You can go and something else different will happen. So that was one of the main changes. The other one, which was the problem with the map, I introduced regional movement rather than counting squares. Now, in the original game, you'll remember, Tom, you count 5 squares to move your nobles. They're called squares, although I think none of them are actually squares. It's 5 areas. It's 5 areas.
They're shapes.
They're shapes. The trouble is, where the shapes meet, can I move? Can I do diagonals? Or do those white lines actually join there or not? And you couldn't see half the time, so you couldn't. It's very, very hard to count 5 squares. It sounds like an easy thing, but it was actually very hard to count 5 squares. And some of those squares were minuscule things. So you've got 2 or 3 massive armies, and you're trying to put them all into Rutland. Sorry, Rutland is a famously very small county in the UK. It's hard to do it. So with regional movement, it meant that I could make the areas much, much larger, because they're just where you plant your troops. They're not to do with movement. And when you move from one region to any area in an adjacent region. And that's really easy. So that's speeded up play. So it makes it much slicker to play. And you can see where people can go rather than having to keep counting various weird directions all the time. So those are the 2 main changes we made that dealt with a lot of those perceived problems of length and some of the complexity, and also rewriting the whole lot of the rules. So in the box, you get Kingmaker II. That's got its own complete set of rules with all the changes that I've made for that. You've also got the classic Kingmaker, which is effectively what I would call the old basic Kingmaker that Avalon Hill did. And then in addition, you've got what I called extended classic, which is classic with bells and whistles, like as a separate little battle system you could use for individual combats in the old Kingmaker. And I've reproduced that and given you a nice little battle board, which is quite fun. You can stick your noble pieces on there and fight individual combats. And there's a whole bunch of variants and additional cards that you can add in if you want as options. So those are the 3 main ways: Kingmaker II, classic, and extended classic with variants. Plus,
well, the good news is you've gotten so far. The initial reaction to this has been pretty good. I'm looking at the ratings and stuff in Board Game Geek. People are seeming to like the changes.
Yeah, I mean, going back to your question, Eric, actually, we had a couple of diehard people, very few actually, who said, "Oh, I don't like regional movements. Surely it's not right. It's not what we expect. It's the whole movement system." I know. Actually, I was quite careful because I tested regional movement to make sure that moving from critical place to critical place was more or less the same number of turns. So it's very, very similar to area movement. It's just it's much, much simpler to implement and to do. So I think I do remember I had one playtester who really did take against that, but everybody else, some people, I had the person who designed the solo challenge, Steve Froud, who's a really, really good Kingmaker player. He initially was very skeptical about the regional movement, but after playing it, he thought, "This is great. This is fine. This is there's no problem with this at all. It's much, much better." So most people have been converted to the new regional movement. In fact, I've had people say, "Can we use regional movement with the old classic game?" And I'm thinking, well, I've not tried it. I mean, you could try it, but it's not been tested. So, but then Kingmaker's like that, isn't it? People will try things out and have their own homegrown variants, regardless of what we say is official. In fact, one of the people I won't name him, one of the people who was very critical of the kinds of things we had done to the game, when he got his copy, because he bought one anyway, which is fine, it's great. He thought it was fabulous. He really, really, really enjoyed it and was very he was very complimentary. But the first time he played Kingmaker II, he introduced lots and lots of options and variants, which, as a designer or developer, I could see would kind of undermine part of what we're trying to do. So if you put certain of the options and variants in, if you put there's a King's Ransom card which allows you to not have a noble die. You just play it and the noble who would have died just doesn't die. Now the trouble is, Kingmaker II relies on on people. People have to die if they're going to die. You can't just stop them dying, which means that if you play at a critical time, it'll stop the prestige victory thing from working. Because if you gang up on somebody who's taken the prestige victory card, and the guy's got a king's ransom and he can just not die when you attack him, that's going to really kind of wreck some of the Kingmaker the second type of approach. So I would be a bit more cautious myself in putting options and variants in it. No, but I'm very pleased with how it's gone.
Tom, we're actually not hearing you.
Hello?
I can hear you. You can hear me, right, Alan?
I can't hear Tom. I can hear you.
Yes. Tom has turned his mic off, which is fun. I may have.
Oh,
Tom has
happened to Tom. Oh,
something has happened to Tom. But we should. Tom is going to swap that out. We should very quickly talk about some recent games that we've played. Because we're coming up at the end of the show, and so let's pick one that you've had a chance to play recently, Alan. What has hit your table recently?
Okay, well, I mean, I could pick a popular one or a very, very unknown one. Which would you prefer?
I'd like unknown. I want to hear about something that we don't know.
Okay, this is a war game. It's called The Pratzen, and it's by a very, very, very famous war game designer called Peter Perler, which I confess, it's always surprised me that very few people seem to have heard of Peter Perler. He literally wrote the book on wargaming. It's called The Art of Wargaming. He's the grandfather of modern wargaming, particularly board wargaming. Really, he's also what we call a professional wargamer, and he does wargaming for the Department of Defense and other official people. So he really knows his stuff. So he designed a game called the Pratzen, which is basically about the French assault on the Pratzen Heights in the Battle of Austerlitz, 2nd of December 1805. Okay, now because he really knows his stuff, I thought this is going to be great. And it was kickstarted, and it had less than 400 backers on it, but it's still funded. It's not a problem. So it's obviously really, your elite cognoscenti who are buying this game, including me. And it's a fascinating game because it's hex and counter, but it really, really, really deals with command control. Now, hex and counter games traditionally have got this problem because they tend to use like zones of control, which most of our audience will probably have heard of. So zones of control, you have an area of one hex surrounding an occupied hex, and it can be variously locking. That if you enter a zone of control, you have to attack, various things, nasty things can happen if you enter a zone of control. Now, that is very gamey. It's horrendously gamey. The traditional thing you do in hex and counter games is you alternate putting a stack of units on one hex, have a gap, and another hex, because generally you can't move through zones of control, which doesn't seem like historical. I mean, historically, you don't just leave gaps in your battle line, but with zones of control, you do. Now, what Peter Perler has done with the Pratzen is he said, well, let's look at this from the point of view of the actual Napoleonic battalion. It can either deploy in line or it can deploy in column. When it gets in a specific range of the enemy, the commanders effectively lose control of that unit because they cannot say to those guys, you're going to charge the enemy there, because the soldiers may just not do it. They just don't want to do it because nobody wants to be close to the enemy, and nobody wants to charge into a load of guys who've got hundreds of muskets aimed at them or massive 8-pounder artillery pieces with canister aimed at them. And the way he's done this is that you have an engagement zone of 8 hexes. So once you enter 8 hexes, you have to roll on a table to see what your troops will do. So command control is get your battalions to the right place and then hope that they go through with an attack and try to ameliorate the problems you have if they don't. So it's all about getting your troops to the right place at the right time. Whether they actually go through with an attack or not is up to the vagaries of fortune, which is kind of right. So you have to work to your army's particular strengths much more, and you won't have the flexibility that you have in a traditional hex and counter war game. So approaching it from that kind of basic command control aspect is a beautiful way of doing a Napoleonic battle. It's a wonderful experience. I've only played one scenario, but it's really good.
Very, very cool. That's called the Pratzen.
Yep.
Tom, just checking in real quick. Or do we have you back?
I changed my batteries before we started, so I don't even know what the deal is here.
I saw you do it. Real quick, I want to talk about a game called Link 2. This comes from Randolph Press. This is basically a puzzle game. You have 2 sets of cards in here, and there's a travel set and a food set that I have looked at. So you have object cards. So in the food set, you have a bunch of food items: pancakes, eggs, salt. And you spread them all out on the table, and then you have a bunch of clue cards, and they come in 5 different levels. So there's basically 5 versions you can play. And level 1, the clues are very simple, like what do you use to make an omelet? And you will match that card to the egg that's on the table and sort of spread them all out with the goal of having 1 item card left over at the end. If you've matched it all up correctly, you have 1 left. You match that to the scenario, the answer key, and there's a little symbol. And if they match, you did it right. And like I said, the level 1s are pretty straightforward, very straightforward. In fact, the first 3 are pretty straightforward. But when you get to like
don't act like you're smarter than everybody else. They're not that straightforward sometimes. Sometimes you don't know the answer. For example, you may not know what foie gras is and get stuck on that for a long time.
Okay, so level 1 and 2 are pretty straightforward. Level 3 is where it gets difficult. Level 4 and 5, though, have some pretty tricky pop culture stuff. So, like Columbo's favorite meal. I didn't know that. And it can get very tricky. But as a group activity, if you get enough people looking at it, they can maybe help you with those pop culture references. So working your way through the different levels is kind of a cool challenge. I really liked it at level 4 and 5. And I haven't played the travel one yet, but I'm looking forward to it. That's called Link 2.
I like it. I'm just concerned because it is a one-time use game.
Or a 5-time use game.
5-time use game, right.
Yeah.
Oh, well, we got a few minutes. I'm going to just gush over the new version of Ra. Ra is such a great game from Rainer Knizia. And the 2 things that the new version is almost overproduced, but the production is so good. It's so helpful to know how to play the game now. The tiles are put on 2 sides of your board, so any tiles that go away at the end of a round, an era, you just wipe them away. On anything on the right side, and the big chunky tiles, everything just feels great. And I'm starting to think this might be my de facto game I play with 5 people. Like if I have 5 people, we're like, what do we need to do to blow 45 minutes to an hour? It's Ra. Straight up. Such a great game.
Should I buy it if I've already got a copy of the original Ra, though?
Yes.
Yeah?
Get it and burn that old copy. Here's the thing. I have a copy of Ra that I had, and I upgraded it. I bought player aids. There's so many different versions. This new version kills the old versions. And there's 2 versions. You can get a nice version, a normal version of it, or you can get the deluxe one. The deluxe one's amazing. But even the nice one is really good. It's easy to understand. It's great to play. And they didn't change a single rule, so the whole thing is still great.
Sounds good, yeah. I should have mentioned that the Pratson is published by Canvas Temple Publishing. Just as a completion of that particular.
Well, that's so Eric can buy it.
Yeah.
Yes. Excellent. Alan, this has been a wonderful discussion. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. If folks want to know more about what you're up to, where can they go to find out the latest with Alan Paull?
Right. The best place is the Surprise Day Games website, where I have a blog. I admit I'm not a great blogger, but I have got stuff on there. And we've got new games coming out this year. War of the Three Sanchos, which is preview on GameFound at the moment, and hoping to do a campaign later in the summer, probably July, possibly August, for War of the Three Sanchos. It's another game in our Pocket campaign series, which has been popular over the last 6 or 7 years. And we've also got another game called Last Bug Standing in the Circle of Doom, which is coming out for Essen Spiel, and it's by Bez. Those of you who know Bez will realize how significant that is. It's a Bez game. It's a small box game. It's not a party game, because Bez often does party games. It's a 2-player thinky game, which we've given a kind of B-movie theme, hence Last Bug Standing in the Circle of Doom. But yeah, all of the information on that should be on our surprisetogames.co.uk website. That's the easiest way. If you want to get me, email is best. As you can tell, I'm an old fuddy-duddy, so I go with email. Alan@surprisestategames.co.uk will get me.
Excellent.
Alrighty, folks. Well, thanks so much for watching another episode of At the Table. Thank you, Alan, for coming on and talking about this. Eric, you need to play Kingmaker and give it a try at some point.
I should check out this new version. Lots of options.
Well, anyway, until next time, I'm Tom Vassell.
And I'm Eric Summerer.
And
I've been Alan Paull.
You have been indeed, and this is At the Table.
Thank you for joining us today. We'll see you again in 2 weeks, and our guest will be Kurt Covert. At the Table is produced by Tom and me, with assistance from Roy Canada, Wendy Yee, and Chris Yee. AI-generated trip itineraries provided by Touring Machine. Our theme is written by Timothy Pinkham, arranged by Dave Culling, and support for everything at the Dice Tower comes from viewers and listeners like you. Reach out to us on Facebook or Twitter, or to Tom@Dicetower.com or Eric@Dicetower.com. Until we see you again, from all of us at the table, have fun
gaming.
Have fun.